In the closing years of his life, Edgar Cayce gave a reading that would stay hidden for decades, considered too disturbing, too prone to misinterpretation. Those who witnessed it recalled an unusual intensity filling the room, as though something far beyond ordinary perception was being unveiled. What he spoke of was not some distant era, but a specific turning point, a window opening around 2027. On the surface, his words seemed to describe collapse, systems crumbling, landscapes transforming, identities dissolving. It was enough to unsettle even his most devoted followers. But this is where most interpretations miss the mark. Cayce was not foretelling America's end. He was describing a transformation so deep it would appear as destruction. In his vision, crisis and rebirth were woven together, like fire sweeping through a forest to make way for new growth. What must collapse, he suggested, are not the people, but the obsolete structures no longer able to contain humanity's expanding consciousness. This was not a warning designed to instill fear. It was an invitation to comprehend what lies ahead. To grasp the significance of this prophecy, one must first understand how Edgar Cayce perceived America itself, not merely as a nation, but as a living spiritual experiment. In his readings, he portrayed the United States as a gathering place for unfinished histories. Souls, he claimed, had assembled here across lifetimes, carrying the reverberations of ancient civilizations where power was abused, wisdom was corrupted, and empires rose and crumbled under the burden of their own imbalance. This convergence was not accidental, it was deliberate. America, from this perspective, was created as a place where those unresolved patterns could at last be faced and transformed. Its founding principles, freedom, equality, unity, were not simply political ideals, but spiritual templates awaiting full expression. And yet, from the very start, those principles existed alongside profound contradictions. That tension served as the catalyst, for genuine transformation requires confronting what has long been evaded. Cayce held that America's path was never about achieving perfection, but about integration, drawing shadow into light. By 2027, this process could be postponed no longer. For Edgar Cayce, the year 2027 carries specific significance. It marks a cycle's completion. Precisely 250 years after 1777, when America first sought to define itself as a unified nation, a full karmic rotation reaches its end. Within Cayce's framework, such cycles represent moments of reckoning when all that a nation has constructed, both visible and hidden, returns for accounting. What was planted in those founding years was deeply contradictory. A vision of freedom existed alongside systems of oppression. Ideals of equality lived beside exclusion and exploitation. These contradictions remained unresolved, merely deferred. By 2027, Cayce suggested deferral would cease to be an option. He called this moment a threshold, a point where illusions can no longer sustain themselves, where the distance between what a nation professes to be and what it actually is becomes undeniable. This represents not a singular event, but a shift in momentum. Gradual change gives way to rapid transformation, avoidance yields to confrontation, identity surrenders to truth. Once that threshold is crossed, everything begins moving simultaneously. Beyond the 2027 threshold, Edgar Cayce described not one crisis, but three unfolding together, interlocked, inseparable, and accelerating in tandem. The first involves geographical disruption. The land itself begins responding, shifting, releasing pressure, reshaping in ways that mirror deeper changes occurring below the surface. Not random chaos, but a physical manifestation of inner imbalance being corrected. The second involves institutional collapse. Systems constructed upon control, extraction, and inequality begin losing their stability. Structures once perceived as permanent begin to crack apart, not from external assault, but because they cannot contain the consciousness awakening within them. The third element is spiritual awakening. As outer systems weaken, something inner stirs to life. People begin questioning reality, identity, and existence itself, opening themselves to an expanded awareness that reaches beyond the material realm. Cayce maintained, these are not isolated occurrences. They form a single process viewed through three distinct lenses: earth, system, and soul. And as they intensify in unison, the known world does not merely shift, it undergoes complete transformation. As this transformation grows more profound, Edgar Cayce envisioned a disruption that would shake society to its foundation, the dissolution of the economic system itself. Between 2028 and 2030, he described a time when money would start losing its significance, not through seizure, but through a change in how people perceived it. The understanding would ripple outward. Value had never resided in currency itself. It existed in the shared belief supporting it. And once that belief starts crumbling, the system cannot endure. In its wake, something more direct takes shape. Communities restructure themselves around tangible realities, skills, connections, pooled resources. The question transforms from what do you possess to what can you offer? For many who constructed their identity upon wealth, this shift feels like devastation. Yet for others, it delivers an unexpected liberation. Cayce's teaching was straightforward yet powerful. Genuine wealth cannot be measured in figures. It exists in your capacity to create, to bond with others, and to nurture life when systems crumble. If economic collapse rattles the external world, what comes next disturbs something far more fundamental, the very nature of how reality is experienced. Edgar Cayce called this interval between 2029 and 2031 the Great Revealing, the moment when the barrier separating ordinary perception from deeper knowing starts growing thin. For countless people, experiences once dismissed as impossible may become impossible to ignore. Heightened intuition, sudden inner knowing, unexplainable memories that feel older than this lifetime. A growing sense that consciousness extends far beyond the physical body. Cayce believed this would happen not to a select few, but on a collective scale. At first, many would resist it. Institutions rooted in material explanations would attempt to dismiss these experiences, labeling them confusion or disorder. But when enough people begin perceiving beyond familiar limits, denial becomes difficult to sustain. This is the true turning point because once people begin to recognize themselves as more than physical beings, everything changes. How they understand life, death, purpose, and each other. The old world depends on forgetting. The new one begins with remembering. After years of disruption and awakening, Edgar Cayce describes something few expected. Not chaos, but reorganization. Around 2032, a new form of society begins to take shape. Not rebuilt from the top down, but rising from communities that learn to adapt when old systems failed. Cayce called this the emergence of a council-based structure. These are not governments in the traditional sense. There are no campaigns, no power struggles, no rigid hierarchies. Instead, leadership naturally forms around those who have demonstrated clarity, balance, and integrity during the most uncertain times. Decision-making shifts as well. Rather than majority rule, communities begin aligning through shared understanding, with solutions recognized collectively rather than forced through division. It may seem unfamiliar, even unrealistic, but it grows from a population that has already changed how it perceives itself and reality. In this new structure, authority no longer comes from position. It comes from presence, from the ability to hold stability when others cannot, from a deeper understanding that serving the whole is no longer distinct from serving oneself. Within all this transformation, Edgar Cayce identified a generation arriving with a fundamentally different consciousness. Children born around and after 2020. He called them bridge souls, present not to conform to the existing world, but to assist in the transition toward a new one. These children frequently exhibit remarkable clarity from their earliest years. They challenge authority, push back against inflexible systems, and seem less inclined to accept explanations that don't resonate as authentic. While previous generations must work to broaden their perception, these children appear to enter life already nearer to that expanded state. This can easily be misinterpreted. What seems like rebellion may actually be keen judgment. What presents as oversensitivity may be enhanced perception. Cayce proposed their purpose is not to be molded by current structures, but to quietly question and transcend them. Through this, they help others recognize what has become obsolete. They are not here to conform. They are here to lead, often unconsciously. And for those who raise or interact with them, the change is subtle yet significant. Less instruction, more attentiveness, less command, more faith. In Edgar Cayce's understanding, what rises from the turmoil is not a diminished nation, but a reimagined one. America, he proposed, was never destined to be an empire. Its truer calling was to become something quieter yet considerably more impactful, a living model, a place where innovative approaches to organizing society could be explored and embodied, not through power, but through example. He envisioned it as a kind of hearth, a hub where ideas are cultivated, where communities demonstrate equilibrium between personal liberty and shared obligation, not flawless, but growing with consciousness. In this capacity, influence no longer derives from domination or expansion. It emerges from harmony. Education shifts toward awakening inner capacity, not merely conveying knowledge. Healing extends beyond symptoms to address root causes. Systems of exchange evolve toward contribution rather than accumulation. Other nations observe not to replicate precisely, but to adapt what aligns with their own cultural frameworks. Through this process, a different form of leadership emerges, not one that demands attention, but one that earns trust. As this transformation unfolds, Edgar Cayce warned it would not occur without resistance, not because change is wrong, but because every established system seeks to preserve itself. The structures built on control, fear, and dependency do not simply vanish. They adapt. They push back. At times, they may even intensify through narratives that heighten uncertainty, through pressure that encourages people to hold on to what feels familiar. Moments of crisis may emerge that seem to require a return to old patterns, safety over awareness, control over trust. But Cayce emphasized something significant. The real struggle is not external, it is internal. Because these systems only maintain power where fear remains unexamined, where identity is attached to what is already fading. For those who begin to recognize this, something shifts. The influence of fear diminishes, discernment grows stronger, and the ability to choose differently becomes clearer. Resistance then is not an obstacle to the transformation. It is part of the process that reveals who is ready to move with it and who is not. While his visions were expansive, Edgar Cayce remained deeply practical about what individuals could do. Preparation, he suggested, is not about fear. It is about readiness. On a physical level, he encouraged building resilience, learning simple, grounded skills, how to grow food, care for the body, and work with natural resources, not to withdraw from society, but to remain steady. If systems become unstable, health also becomes essential. A clearer body supports a clearer mind. Eating with awareness, reducing excess, and maintaining balance are not merely lifestyle choices. They shape perception itself. But beyond the physical, he stressed something of greater importance: inner stability, the capacity to remain centered when uncertainty swells, to think with clarity when others react impulsively, to respond rather than succumb to panic, and perhaps, most crucially, community. No one navigates change in isolation. Strong connections, mutual aid, and shared accountability form the true bedrock of security. Cayce's message was straightforward. Do not prepare merely to survive what lies ahead. Prepare to engage with it calmly, intentionally, and with something of value to contribute. As the transformation intensifies, Edgar Cayce spoke of a phase less apparent yet far more profound. Around 2030 to 2031, a collective reckoning emerges, not through argument or historical examination, but as something deeply experienced. The burden of the past, conflict, injustice, and unaddressed wounds rises into consciousness in a manner that can no longer be dismissed or rationalized. Stories that once brought solace begin to unravel, giving way to a sharper, more truthful recognition of what has occurred. For many, this stirs unease, even confusion, because identity itself is questioned. What once seemed certain becomes something requiring reevaluation. What was long avoided starts to emerge. Yet Cayce did not portray this as retribution. He understood it as an essential passage toward wholeness. Because without acknowledgement, genuine transformation remains impossible. And without confronting what has been buried, there can be no liberation. This phase concerns not the assignment of fault. It is about restoring equilibrium by permitting truth to surface and finally be grasped. Throughout this period of collective reckoning, Edgar Cayce spoke of a subtle yet vital purpose: those who would guide others through what seems insurmountable. He called them grief holders. These are not leaders in the conventional meaning, nor do they exist to repair what is transpiring. Rather, these are people who have already confronted their own internal battles, who have discovered how to remain present with discomfort instead of avoiding it. As a result, they possess a different quality of steadiness. When emotions surge, whether confusion, grief, or even anger, they do not respond reactively. They stay present, centered, and accessible. Their mere presence opens room for others to work through their experiences without becoming overwhelmed by them. Cayce proposed that their purpose is not to lead through providing answers, but through demonstration, revealing that challenging emotions can be experienced without becoming consuming. That clarity can emerge again, even following uncertainty. In moments of shared intensity, this type of presence becomes quietly influential, not by altering circumstances, but by supporting others as they navigate through them. As the transition progresses, Edgar Cayce shared a viewpoint that may feel challenging, yet profoundly human. He proposed that not every soul would stay through the complete span of change. During times of profound transformation, there may be more departures than anticipated, instances where people pass in ways that appear sudden or difficult to comprehend. From Cayce's perspective, this is not necessarily failure or loss in the conventional sense. Some lives, he believed, reach completion once their purpose has been achieved, whether through presence, impact, or a single significant moment that touches others. For those who remain, the experience can still be painful. Grief does not vanish simply because meaning is offered. But within that grief, there can also be a change in understanding, that not every ending is incomplete, and not every departure lacks purpose. Cayce's message here is not to eliminate sorrow, but to create space for it alongside the possibility that even in loss, there may be a greater unfolding occurring. When you step back and view the complete picture, Edgar Cayce's message is not about fear, it is about perspective. What appears to be collapse may actually be transition. What may feel like loss could actually be a clearing, and what seems uncertain might simply be unfamiliar. The years around 2027 are not portrayed as an ending, but as a transition from one way of understanding life to another, a movement away from external definitions of identity towards something more internal, more conscious. This requires no belief, only attention, because regardless of interpretation, the underlying message remains consistent. Change is unavoidable, but how it is experienced depends on how it is approached. Met with resistance, it feels chaotic. Met with awareness, it begins to make sense. Cayce's vision ultimately speaks to responsibility, not for controlling the future, but for how each person chooses to engage with it. Calm or reactive, closed or open, disconnected or present. In that sense, the future is not something waiting ahead. It is something being shaped moment by those willing to approach it consciously. If this message spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video to support more content like this. Share it with someone who could use clarity right now. Subscribe for deeper exploration of hidden truths and spiritual awakening. Comment below, do you already sense something shifting? Your awareness might be exactly what someone else needs to awaken theirs.